righty. Well, we're going to be in 1 Peter chapter 2. Chapter 2. And we ended 2 Sundays ago in verse 14, but we're going to kind of give a little bit of a recap. And hopefully you still have your discussion sheet handouts of this section that we have right here. Obviously, we already answered question number 1, where it says, what does Peter mean when he commands to submit to every human institution? I know that we answered it last 2 Sundays ago, so.
Is that obey the local law where you live? Is that it?
Yes, to submit to every human institution, yes. Yeah. But now, what did Peter stress that idea of submitting? Because how do we use that word submission today in our society?
Obey.
Obey.
Obey the laws of the land.
Obey the laws of the land. Now.
To give up.
What's that?
To give up.
To give up what?
I don't know. Like you submitted, gave up.
You submitted, you gave up, like you tap out?
Yeah.
Okay, but.
As our society uses it, it is more of a to be less than, as in you're not as good as the person you're submitting to, which is why we hate the word submission.
Yeah, all right, thank you. All right, thank you for answering the question on how we tend to use that word in society today. We tend to look at that word submission in today's society more as a positive or a negative? Negative, exactly. For some reason, people think that by submitting, you're lesser than the other person, meaning that the person has some type of dominance or some type of authority over you to the fact where you're not important. But is that how Peter uses the word? Is that how the word submit was used back during the first century time? No. What did it mean? Well, somebody had to write the definition down. Yeah, it means to obey the laws of the land, but it's more than just that.
Respect.
Okay, yeah, there's some respect out of it. You're showing some form of respect to the one that you are submitting to. But let me ask you this. Is submission, is it involuntarily or is it voluntarily? Say it louder.
Voluntary.
Voluntarily, yes. Voluntarily, it's willfully being done. And so, what is it that you are letting go of, and what is it that you are embracing when you're submitting to somebody? You're letting go of what?
Ego. Our ego.
You're letting go of your ego? You're letting go of your own will? Yes. You're willfully placing yourself under another, even when you disagree, or only with things that you agree with.
Only if it doesn't go against God.
Only if it doesn't go against God's standard. Other than that, Peter says we're called to submit. Now, every human institution. Now, 2 Sundays ago, we kind of focused mainly on the government system, which, yes, includes that. But what is every human institution, though? Is it just the government?
You have to
No.
submit at work. You have to do what they want you to do.
Your work, your job, your college. I know that I went to Harding University, and it was considered to be a private school. And boy, there were a lot of rules that a lot of the kids did not like. I have to wake up and go to chapel every single day. Like, come on, it's 30 minutes. Really? But yeah, people would complain about that.
People complain about a lot of stuff.
People complain about a lot of stuff. Hey, and I'm guilty of that as well. We all do. But every human institution, yes, your job, your college, your school. I think this is good for young kids when we're teaching our young kids as well, is to show them this passage right here about concerning their teachers. You have to listen to the teacher. You have to do what the teacher wants you to do. What else? schools, college, work.
Church.
In sports, you gotta follow the rules.
In sports, you got to follow the rules as well.
Church.
In church, yes. So who are we to submit to? Jesus first. All right, he's the head of the church, and then the elders, because the elders are also under the authority of Christ, and so they are responsible to make sure that what is being taught is the truth. And yes, when it comes to other certain matters, the way that the church wants to use the church treasury as far as evangelism, benevolence, and edification goes, there may be something that they decide to use that money towards that you may not like or disagree with. Are you going to get upset? Are you going to, as some people may say, take your ball and go home? Are you going to complain and just decide to go to a different church or a different congregation? And then later on find out that other congregation that you went to made a decision that you don't like, and so you decide to leave that one and go to all these different ones, start church hopping? Yeah. Here's the thing. We're not all going to agree with certain decisions that the elders make. But as long as they are making decisions that do not go against God's standard, we are called to follow. Plain and simple, right? Okay, so submission. Submission. Willingly placing yourself under another, even when you disagree. So that goes to the federal government, that goes to every human institution, whether if it's the sports industry, whether if it is school, whether if it is our job, whether if it is college, and etc. The list goes on. There are rules that you have to follow, and you may not agree with it, but guess what? You got to follow it, as long as it does not go against God's standard. Plain and simple, all right? I think we used the example 2 Sundays ago about, it's got a good conversation going, but we do need to move on, so we won't spend too much time on it. But we talked about the right to bear arms. Yeah, we're blessed to be able to have that right. But if that right is taken away, does that go against God's word at all? Can anybody show me in the New Testament about a passage where it says that you have the right to have a gun and whatnot? No. So if that were to happen, then what's going to be first? Is it going to be your political group affiliation first? Or is it going to be your Christian citizenship first? The answer is totally up to you. All I can do is teach you and preach to you the truth of God's word. But moving on, though. All right, notice this right here. Verse 15, okay? Somebody go ahead and read verse 15 and 16.
For so is the will of God, that with well-doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness, but as the servants of God.
All right, thank you very much. Now, if you notice question number 2 in your discussion sheet handout, it says, how can our persecutors be silenced, according to verse 15? You have to look back and read verse 15 again, 1 Peter chapter 2. How can our persecutors be silenced?
By ignorance.
What's that?
By ignorance
By well-doing.
and foolish men.
Yes, the ignorant and the foolish men. How can we silence them?
By well-doing.
By well-doing. Does anybody else have anything different in the version that you're reading from?
By submitting.
By submitting? In the context overall, yeah. And that kind of jumps ahead a little bit into question 3. But
Mine just says
hold on to that thought right there.
mine just says doing good.
Doing good. All right. Well-doing or doing good. Now, we live and do what is right in order to demonstrate to them whose will that we are following. Why is it that we don't retaliate? Why is it that we don't seek vengeance when others criticize us or ridicule us or do us harm? Why is it that we do not retaliate?
Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord.
Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So whose will are we following when we don't retaliate? God's will. God's will. So Peter says that when others are doing you harm or doing you evil in life, you don't retaliate because you continue to do what is right and what is good, and you're demonstrating to them whose will that you're following. Because what does the world say? What does the will of the world say when others do you harm? Get them, yes, get them back. Get them back. And I'd say that's not just necessarily the will of the world, but the will of the flesh as well. Because that sometimes is a battle that we have to face and that we have to fight against. You know, the flesh within us is trying to say, get even. But no, the spirit within us, the will of God within us is saying, no, don't do it. Because you know who's going to avenge you in the end. God is going to avenge you. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Put it in God's hands. Let God deal with it. Let God handle it. You continue to do what is good and what is right. Now, is that easier said than done? Yeah, it is. Because like I said, I mean, we're constantly having this war within us that's fighting. Part of us is wanting to get back, but the other part of us within us, which is the will of God, is fighting and saying, no, don't do it. And so when somebody makes false accusations towards you, which could mess up your job, your career, maybe even your family, what are you to do?
You can calmly explain the lie.
Yes.
And if the person in charge still believes the lie, I don't know what else you can do.
Mm.
But I had that happen at work. Someone said I did a part a certain way, and I was able to prove that I didn't touch it.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't do nothing to the other person, but at least everyone knew that I wasn't telling it. I was telling the truth, and it wasn't me that did it.
Yeah.
Also, if you walk in the lie, people will take up for you because they know, like, if I start the rumor, well, Pete's out drinking, well, you know Pete's not out drinking. You know, sorry, Pete. But you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Somebody would go, that's not what Pete does, because they know how he is. He
Mhm.
shows his light all the time.
That's right.
Is that better?
It does, and it does happen
It
on the
does.
job,
Mhm.
and you do have people that see who you are for who you are.
Mhm.
And then it goes the other way around. You're in the little group and they say, yeah, so-and-so, he's not truthful. You know that.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that.
Yes. I think a lot of it goes back towards the character of the one who's accusing and the one who's even being accused. Now, if you know the character of the one who's accusing to be a liar, to be a cheat, to be starting drama, to be spreading rumors or gossiping, or even just to do something in order to get some kind of, I guess, benefit out of it, then you can say, well, I know that kind of person is doing the accusing, and I also know the kind of character of the person who's being accused. Two totally different characters. The one being accused has done honest work in the past, has worked hard, has been truthful all the time, walks in the light as basically what Vicky just mentioned here. And so you'll have people who stick up for you. But now, as far as our responsibility goes, you can explain calmly the truth of the situation. But if they end up still believing that lie, what are you to do next?
It depends.
It does depend. And that's a little bit difficult. Why would you say that?
Depends on the nature of the accusation, the nature of the consequences of your responsibilities.
Mhm.
Say if you're accused and the accuser is somebody of a specially protected class, what's going to happen is that you're fired immediately without any investigation. It's just what happens.
Mhm.
Same for certain accusations. You're fired immediately without any expectation. So what if you have a family to feed? Those accusations will make you unemployable.
Mhm.
So therefore, you're gonna have to use every right you have to fight it, so you can
Yes.
continue to provide for your family as God has commanded you to do so.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point. And so it kind of just, you have to use a lot of wisdom and discernment. I mean, because if your family is going to be affected by this, then yeah, I mean, it's important for you to take action immediately. And that's biblical because when you read 2 Corinthians, the whole purpose of why Paul is writing that letter is because his apostleship and his ministry was on the line. And don't want to go into the whole spiel of 2 Corinthians. It's a great book, but Paul even has to come to a point where he has to stand up and defend his ministry and his apostleship because it was on the line. And if he didn't, then things probably would have gotten worse and escalated to worse things. And so using a lot of wisdom and discernment will be part of it. And you have to ask yourself the question like, okay, well, is this something that I need to address and need to deal with immediately because it's going to affect my family, it's going to affect my job, it's going to affect my employment, it's going to affect, putting food on the table for my family, then yeah, it's something that you need to address and deal with. But if it's something that's just going to, I don't know, not affect those areas, what does Peter want us to do? Just move on and continue doing good. Yes. Move on and continue doing good. Now, here's the thing, and this is a good practical advice, is that if something like that were to happen and it reaches your ear before it reaches your boss or boss's ears, what do you think would be the wise thing to do?
Go to your boss and talk to them.
Go to your boss and talk to them. Yeah, and say, hey, look, I just want to let you know, hear it from the horse's mouth, hear it from my own mouth that there's this thing that's probably going around, and I'm just going to be straight up and honest with you that is a lie and it's a false rumor. But now, let me ask you this. Here's another good question. What if you're the one that's starting to hear about it? What if somebody came up to you and said, go back to your example. What if somebody came up to you and said, hey, I caught Pete drinking? What's the easiest solution to kind of back away from that, such gossip?
Tell them, no, that's not true.
Tell them, no, that's not true?
Yeah, for a fact it's not true. And if you hear it again, you're going to make sure to tell whoever's telling you, because I had that situation, and I nipped it in the butt. All these people were talking about these, and I said, no. Then when one other person came, I said, no, that's not true. I know for a fact. And rumors stopped because it couldn't grow.
Yes.
It's like a fire. You got to put it out.
Yes, exactly. And here's a good, again, practical advice that you can use the next time somebody tries to come up to you and to try to, start some kind of rumor, accusation, or gossip. This is what I do, and it's always effective. Have yourself a notebook, and before they even say something, when they say, hey, I need to talk to you about so-and-so, do this.
Talk to the hand.
No, not talk to the hand. Tell them to hold on. Or you just do that. Grab out a piece of paper or a notebook with a pen. Hand it to them and say this to them. Okay. Before you even say another word, I actually want you to write down a statement of it with your name and your signature at the bottom, date it, and in case if I have to actually come to you and you need to testify about this, then you'll do so. You want to know how many times I've had people actually write a statement? 0. 0. Yep. And I've had to do that one too many times. And the results are always the same. They never want to do it. That should go ahead and tell you what they were trying to tell you is probably not true at all. So use that next time and see if they'll actually write a statement.
One more way of handling it is go back to Pete drinking. Okay, sorry, Pete. Okay, I caught Pete drinking. Really? That's a shame. Did you talk to him yet? No.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Best way to handle it is just ask them, did you go to that person and talk to them about it first? No. Well, do that before you start going around talking to people all about that stuff. But anyways, what Peter says is that when you continue on, however, doing good, you will put them to silence. Because actions speak louder than words. And by showing your good works or the good lifestyle that you are living by, and you're demonstrating to them whose will that you are living by, the will of God, it will bring silence upon them. Maybe not right away. Peter doesn't say it's going to happen right away, but later on, down the road, they'll be silenced in one of two ways. Later on down the road, they'll be silenced by finally just stopping and dying out. Or, if not, who's going to silence them in the end?
God.
God. God will ultimately bring them to silence in the end. So keep in mind that Peter doesn't say it's going to happen right away or it's going to happen immediately. But he says continue on doing the will of God. You just keep having the good and best attitude, and you keep on living by God's will. And then he goes on to say in verse 16, live or act as people who are free. Not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants or bondservants of God. Now again, kind of keeping this in the overall context, as Christians, whose citizenship are we under?
God.
Christ, God. Which kingdom do we belong to?
Church.
The church,
God's
the kingdom of Christ. Now, yes, as human beings living under a system of government, we're still considered to be citizenships under America. But who is our higher authority? Christ is. So if he is our higher authority that we're called to submit to, which kingdom is higher? His kingdom or the earthly kingdom?
Christ's kingdom.
Christ's kingdom. Plain and simple. We submit for the Lord's sake. Thus, we are free from the secular government because we are born again to a living hope as citizens of God's kingdom. But Peter says, do not use that freedom that you have as a cover-up for evil. Now, this Greek word for covering comes from the idea of to conceal for a strategy. So Peter tells them not to use that as an excuse or a strategy to do whatever it is that you want to do. You can't just break the law in the land and just say, my God's going to protect me because I'm part of a higher kingdom. Yeah, this kingdom's going to be destroyed. This earthly kingdom's going to be destroyed. It's going to be gone. So why not? Peter says, by doing that, you know what's going to happen if you're going to act and behave that way? You're showing to them that you truly are not living by the will of God when you behave and act that way. And secondly, you're going to reap some punishment. Now, Peter's going to go on to say in his discussion about the servants and the master's relationship, look what he says here. Later on in verse 20, he says, "For what credit is it when you sin and are beaten for it, you endure?" In other words, he's saying that if you are being beaten or if you're facing punishment or the consequences by doing what is wrong, you deserve it, he says. But being punished for doing what is good and what is right, he goes on to say that is actually the will of God in your life. That's what you're called to do in the will of God. Are we going to suffer for doing what is right in this world? Yeah, we are. We're going to suffer for doing what is right in the world. But Peter says it is better for you to suffer by the hands of men for doing what is right than to suffer from the hands of God for doing that which is wrong. I'll say it again. It is better for you to suffer by the hands of men for doing what is right than for you to suffer by the hand of God for doing what is wrong. So which of the two would you rather want to be under? Do you want to be under the wrath of God? Or do you rather be under the wrath of men for doing what is right?
Men can only hurt you for so long.
Exactly. Go back to Matthew chapter 22. What does Jesus say concerning about our fear that we have? He says, do not fear those that can destroy the body and not the soul, but rather fear him who has the power to destroy both the body and the soul. So I'd rather be under the wrath of men for doing what is right and good than to be under the wrath of God for doing that which is wrong and evil. So Peter says that if you decide to take matters into your own hands, if you decide to actually retaliate, if you decide to start doing that which is wrong and that which is evil, then guess what? You're storing up God's wrath on the day of judgment. Unless you come to repentance, that is. But if you're a Christian who is suffering for doing that which is right and good, yeah, you may suffer from the hands of men, even though what you did was right and good, you may suffer from their hands. But you reap eternal rewards by God on that great and last day. So again, this kind of goes back to the living hope that we have. It goes back to our eternal life. Is it worth throwing it away just to have a little bit of satisfaction in this world by getting even or by breaking the laws of the land or by retaliating or whatever? Is it worth giving up your eternal life just for a small bit of satisfaction in this temporary world? Is it worth it? Is it worth quitting? Is it worth giving it up?
Well, there are some guys in jail right now that think it was
Yeah.
for the insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And they're probably swearing to you right now they did right.
Yeah,
Because God told them that take care of the evil people.
that's right.
I know it's because they're not listening to the right book
Yeah.
or the right preacher.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's what's going on in our country right here. And there, he wrote it way back then. He wrote it.
Yeah. Exactly. Way back then. And, like you say, the next coming months, it's going to be an ugly election. I already know it. Because I already see it right now. Come November, it's going to be ugly. I'll tell you what, if things don't go the way certain people want it, should we be surprised that a civil war could break out? No,
We were already an inch and a half away from a civil war as it was.
absolutely. I agree. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of people tend to think that, a civil war can't happen because if that were to happen, those who are wanting to rebel or secede from this nation are not going to have much resources. True, but there's a couple things to consider. One is that maybe around this time they're trying to find some ways secretly to get those resources. And secondly, has that stopped anybody before?
Succession is usually not involved in a civil war. We are unique in that case.
Mm-hmm.
A new civil war would look like the Spanish Civil War or the French Revolution.
Yeah. It's going to be ugly, folks, but what does God say as a Christian, okay? I know being born and raised in a wonderful nation, very blessed to be part of this nation. We are. But again, put your Christian standard first. If that were to happen, would you be all for the rebellion?
Well, the Bible calls, by doing right, we put the foolish people to shame.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those leading right now, but that's the ones that the Bible's talking about, putting them to shame by doing right.
Mm-hmm.
Even in spite of the fact that we've got, I'm sorry, but we've got fools leading us right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what I would do if somebody came to my door and told me to give everything I've got to them because they're the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
But of according to the Bible, it didn't say put righteous men to shame. The Bible says.
Yeah.
It said put foolish men to shame.
Yeah.
Well, somebody's gotta be the fool in it.
Yeah. No, I think it's,
That's the Bible talking.
yeah, and that was happening in the first century. I mean, you read towards the end of the chapter 10 of Hebrews, I mean, the writer mentions that. A lot of Christians there, they were losing their property. They were taking their homes, they were taking all of their belongings.
And probably the reasoning made no sense whatsoever to them at the time. You know,
Yep.
it's just not even making any sense, but
No.
here I am submitting.
Yeah. No, I think it's, sorry, go
They
ahead.
were out on their own.
They were.
Looking for something to eat.
They were. But, you know, who was their king that was taking care of them, though?
Say again?
Who was their true king that was taking care of them?
Yes, they ate.
Yeah.
Sometimes they got executed.
Yeah, sometimes they got executed. Yeah. I know topics and subjects like this are maybe a little bit hard to swallow, but it's talked about,
Well, if we're not
and
gonna
we
talk
can't
about it,
overlook it.
if we're not gonna talk about it as a church body,
Yeah.
then we're forced to talk about it outside of the church body, which is maybe talking to fools,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, if we're not talking, I'd rather be talking to y'all
Yeah.
who fear God
Yeah.
than talking to somebody that doesn't fear God. They're just ranting and raving about how we gotta get things straight. Well, that's not gonna get anything straight.
Exactly.
We
It's
don't
not-
talk about it here, world.
Just one more point to throw out there is that we ought to be talking about it because it is an issue that is going to come up.
Yes, it is.
We got to figure out which leader do we listen to when we have the federal government saying, give us your guns, and the state government says, don't you dare.
Yeah.
Where the federal government says, train your kids or we'll kidnap them. And the state and the sheriff says, not on my watch.
Yeah.
Which one's it going to be?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be very hard to cause this country to where they couldn't even get food in grocery stores.
Yeah.
And people would be starving, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Shut down truck traffic, train traffic, aircraft, you know? No food in the grocery stores. We'd be in a pretty bad mess, you know?
It would be. It would be. And there's foreign countries overseas that don't have any grocery stores,
Yeah.
that are starving. And the water supply system that they have is not good at all. And yet, when you look at them and meet them, yeah, they're struggling, but they seem to be pretty content. Just talk with Greg. I mean, I'm sure Greg has already shared with y'all many stories from his experience over there in the mission field. But man, he has shared a lot with me. And he always explains it in the end, saying and they're always end up being content. And it seems that because of Christ,
Yes.
them having Christ,
Amen.
is what brings that full, complete contentment. Anyways, all right, good stuff right now. Yeah, good discussion. But like I said, this is a topic that needs to be talked about, and we will pick up where we left off. So I believe we are in 17 now. Yes, we'll pick up at verse 17 next Sunday, if the good Lord wills. Thank you all for your comments and questions.